Remember how strange patterns began to appear on fields with corn and wheat in the 90s and at the beginning of the 2000s in southern England? Many people believe these were messages from extrasolar civilizations. Hollywood even made movies dedicated to this phenomenon. But then, for some reason, all the patterns disappeared. It looked as if they stopped being trendy, and the inhabitants of other planets decided not to draw crop circles anymore. In fact, this is partially true. The reason for their disappearance relates to a certain art becoming unpopular. But to understand what it means, let's first find out where these circles came from. The first reports of strange patterns in the fields appeared in the 17th century. In some pamphlets and scientific publications, people wrote about crop circles. The reports were not convincing and had no evidence. In the late 60s of the 20th century, people in Australia started reporting strange geometric marks in the fields. At the same time, a comparable situation was described by the residents of Wiltshire, England, and still, no one provided any evidence. Then, news about strange crop circles appeared in Australia in the 60s of the 20th century. But this time, people managed to solve the mystery of this phenomenon. It turned out that scraps of crumpled floating reeds in the lagoon created patterns that looked like they were handmade. Such circles were common during the rainy season when small whirlwinds swept over the lagoons. A local farmer then said he saw a space object flying over the fields and making patterns. But the locals dispelled this myth and revealed the truth. Stories about extraterrestrial civilizations became popular in the 40s thanks to the famous story about a spaceship that crashed in New Mexico. Rumors said that the CIA agents took the crew to secret bases. News about it appeared all over the U.S. People really believed that scientists studied the technologies of the space guests and conducted experiments on their bodies. And many believe that even today. People saw strange flying objects circle over Nevada. The appearance of colorful lights in the night sky of New Mexico became quite a frequent occurrence. Thousands of tourists came to see something like this with their own eyes, but it was all fiction. Those secret bases were and still are real, a testing ground for reconnaissance planes. Of course, many of them looked unusual, and people believed they had seen ships from other galaxies. And that object that fell in New Mexico was an ordinary weather balloon. All these crop circle stories and legends about secret bases became a topic of conversation for two friends, Doug Bauer and Dave Chortley. In the late 70s, they liked hanging out near Winchester, England. They started thinking about how to prank people using these flying saucer stories. That evening, they decided to create geometric patterns in the fields together and wait for society to react. After a while, they arrived at some farmer's field in South England and began implementing their plan. They used ropes, a twist of wire stuck to a baseball hat, and some boards to create a beautiful pattern. When the job was done, no one attached any importance to this. Then, two friends started drawing circles in other fields. For several years, they created paintings that shocked local farmers. But after the media found out about the mysterious phenomenon, the works of Bauer and Chorley became famous worldwide. The artists were in no hurry to reveal the origin of the circles, so thousands of tourists and fans of extraterrestrial civilizations began to come to the south of England. Oh, by the way, people who believed in the extraordinary nature of these patterns got the nickname croppies. The patterns in the fields reached the peak of their popularity, and the artists confessed what they had done. For sure, many croppies were disappointed, but the work of two friends inspired many others to create similar things. Even though there was nothing mysterious about this phenomenon, it was still impressive. Many artists started drawing crop circles for advertising purposes. For example, during the Olympic Games in London in 2012, a group of farmers created the Olympic symbol of 5 rings by mowing the grass in a field. Many claimed that these were the biggest Olympic rings in history. A few years later, Locals noticed a huge pattern with strange geometric shapes in the south of San Francisco. No one had seen anything like it. Even the circles made by the two friends from England weren't so weird. Of course, many media said that spaceships from other planets had left a message to Earthlings. But these fairy tales were quickly dispelled because NVIDIA admitted to the pattern creation. The strange drawing in the field was the image of a new chip the company planned to present at the upcoming CES exhibition. Crop circles have become a popular phenomenon in some countries. Many people like painting graffiti on the walls. Others decorate asphalt with bright calligraphic patterns. And some have fallen in love with creating traces of extraterrestrial civilizations in cornfields. Artists use wooden boards to trample the contours with smooth lines. And to hide chew marks, they walk inside the ruts left by tractor tires. Thus, the patterns seem to be made by a spaceship that didn't touch the ground. Triangles, spinners, crescents, complex geometric patterns. Artists try to create beautiful and fancy designs. Of course, many people don't like this art. Imagine you're a farmer and these circles frequently appear in your field. You lose crops and money because of a group of fans who love to express themselves that way. One Illinois newspaper called patterns a plague in the 90s because artists created them too often, spoiling sown fields. One of the most famous cases of this phenomenon is called the Julia set. In 1996, large circles appeared near Stonehenge. No one attached much importance to them, but the strange fact in the story was that a local pilot was flying over the field an hour before the patterns appeared and didn't see anyone there. Such a huge circle couldn't have been created in an hour, so many believed in its extraordinary origin again. Journalists interviewed local inhabitants and received various versions. Some claimed that the circles had been left by a flying plate, while others said it was artist's work. Then the creator of Julia's set went out and admitted that he had done all the job the night before the pilot noticed them. In the same year, other mysterious circles appeared in an agricultural field in the English village of Chiselden. No one paid much attention to them, as they were clearly another work by local artists. But then, 8 years later, this pattern became popular again because of a strange stone found in Roswell, New Mexico. A farmer noticed an unusual pattern carved on the surface of a smooth rock. He photographed it and posted it on the internet. Users immediately found similarities between the pattern on the stone and the crop circles in Chiselden. They named the stone the Roswell Rock. The strange artifact had one interesting feature: magnetic properties. It started spinning when a magnet was nearby. Its smooth surface, perfectly engraved pattern, and magnetic properties indicated that the find could have been a piece of some spaceship from another planet that left the patterns in Chiselden. Further studies showed that the Roswell rock didn't have any strange properties. X-rays and computed tomography revealed nothing extraordinary. Obviously, it was the work of the same artist that had made those Chiselden circles. Despite all the debunked myths about the mysterious patterns, people continue to believe in them. Some hope there is intelligent life somewhere among the stars. Others love fan communities and gather at themed festivals dedicated to extraterrestrial life. But today, we don't hear much about this phenomenon because it's not so popular anymore. Well, maybe it's time. We need the crappies to produce something new and show us amazing things that will make people believe in life from other planets again.
Life might not be a walk in the park, but for some people, it is a walk in the garden. Literally. There's a village in Denmark that looks like a carefully curated garden when seen from above. This circular community was built in 1964 on the outskirts of Copenhagen. There are 24 circles made up of a dozen homes each and 284 garden plots. This unusual design might look futuristic, but it was actually inspired by a traditional pattern of Danish villages from centuries ago. The middle of the village, commonly a well, would be the main point for mingling, hanging out, and making that community spirit grow as strong as it can be. Looks like this pizza-shaped planning must cause huge clog-ups when everyone leaves for work in the morning and comes back in the evening. But not really, since the houses are used as weekend getaway spots. It's a big thing in Denmark, as most people living in the city like to have a cabin in the countryside. Only people who permanently reside nearby can buy a house in Garden City. They can visit the cabins from April to October, or during the weekends. The nearby gardens are available for rent at an affordable monthly rate. If you're inspired by futuristic designs, you're definitely going to love Smart Forest City in Mexico. It's still in the project stages and is being designed by the same Italian architect who built the vertical forest in his hometown of Milan. It's 2 huge towers with 700 trees, 11,000 plants, and 5,000 shrubs growing right out of the concrete. The Mexican project will be a botanical garden within a modern city near Cancun, inspired by Mayan heritage and honoring their special relationship and respect for nature. It's going to house 130,000 people in homes covered by plants. It will be a research center, so the residents will be mostly students and scientists who are going to take a record of their unique living experiences. It could transform the cities as we know them into something new. Forest City will be completely self-sufficient. It'll have its own food, energy from solar panels, electric and semi-automatic transportation systems, and water turned from sea salty into drinkable. Talk about the city of the future. The Orbit is the name of another project that is going to transform a rural town in Canada into the city of the future. It will be home to the next generation community. These lucky guys are promised to enjoy the best of both worlds, a rural lifestyle with the cutting-edge technology of the future. The Orbit will be packed with fiber optics, drone ports, self-driving vehicles, and large rooftops with foliage to release plenty of oxygen. The streets will be a mix of circles and squares going from the central hub. Reminds me of that Danish garden city. Don't feel like waiting for cities and villages of the future to be finished? Yeah, I hear ya. Well, may I interest you in an already existing town encrusted with diamonds instead? You won't see them without a microscope, but they're still there in Nördlingen, Germany. When the first residents came here somewhere around the 9th century CE, they were sure they were settling down in a volcanic crater. They didn't know the stone they were using for construction was embedded with millions of tiny diamonds, and the origins of the crater were out of this world. An asteroid slightly larger than half a mile in diameter hit our planet around 14.5 million years ago in what is now Bavaria and left a crater 16 miles wide. The bedrock was under such intense heat and pressure that the bubbles of carbon inside transformed into tiny diamonds at a concentration like nowhere else in the world. The secret was only uncovered in the 1960s, when 2 geologists from the USA studied the landscape from a distance and noticed it didn't look exactly like a volcanic crater. The Popeye village in Malta might not have any residents, but it's far from being quiet when the visitors arrive. The whole village was once a movie set for the 1980 comic strip screen version of the story of Popeye. Yeah, that sailor who loved spinach a lot. It was the first lead role for Robin Williams, by the way. To build the movie set, they brought tree trunk logs from the Netherlands and some wooden shingles from Canada and built over 20 realistically looking constructions. There's a nautical school, a bakery, a post office, the mayor's office, and Popeye Comic Museum. The movie became a huge hit, and the locals decided not to part with it. Instead of disassembling it, they turned the set into a theme park. You can have some family fun here, and the color of the water in the bay is out of this world. If you feel like saving some money for your new home, you might consider investing in real estate in the Spanish town of Centennial de las Bodegas. You won't need to pay for building some of the walls and the ceilings. 3,000 locals live under and directly into the sides of Cadiz Mountains. The place has a history of at least 2,000 years. The cliffs have protected many generations living here from unwanted guests. Plus, the rocks keep the houses cool in the summer and warm in the winter. That's right, you can also save on air conditioning. The sense of community is strong as ever in our next destination. Santa Cruz del Isolte in Colombia is one of the world's most crowded islands, with around 900 to 1,200 residents living in the territory about the size of 2 soccer fields. Fishermen built this island on a coral platform over a century ago. They chose it because of its beautiful location and the absence of mosquitoes. I can completely relate to that. The families of the original settlers were growing, and most of them never left the island. All the residents are natives, and they all have one of 6 different last names. When the family needs extra space, they just add an extra floor to one of around 100 homes in town. Now it has a school, shops, a church, and 1 restaurant. There is no traffic since the streets aren't wide enough for cars or trucks, and the distances are perfectly walkable. And there's no need to lock the doors when you leave. Everyone knows each other, so the crime rate equals 0. Ever wondered what it's like to live inside a beehive? Well, you can experience something close, at least in terms of shape, if you stay in the Italian town of Alberobello. These houses, called trulli, have their history. In the 17th century, the King of Naples sent tax collectors to the area. The local lord had a smart idea to build a settlement of houses that could be easily assembled and disassembled to avoid paying the settlement tax. Even when the town became free from their overseer, they kept the original style of their houses with dry stone walls and conical roofs. Game of Thrones fans, this one's for you. You can find the real-life village that served as the backdrop for the Yellow City in your favorite saga in Morocco. And it's much more than just a movie set. The village is a UNESCO heritage site and a typical example of a pre-Saharan habitat. Earthen buildings are safely protected by high walls. Some of the houses look pretty modest. Others are more like urban castles. The village used to be one of the key stops on the ancient Sahara trade route. Traders would take a nice break from traveling here on their way to Timbuktu or the Western Sahara. It looks like it's thousands of years old, but in reality, the oldest constructions here were built no earlier than the 17th century. But even that is pretty impressive. The builders of the earthen village have adapted it perfectly to climactic conditions. The larger houses are regularly maintained, and the materials used are still the same: earth and wood.
NASA made this cool rover called Curiosity and sent it to Mars to see what else we can find out about the red planet, the one that will possibly become our next home. Curiosity has been exploring the surface of Mars, taking measurements and gathering data about the planet for more than 10 years. And good old Curiosity stumbled upon some interesting wave-rippled rocks in the region of the Martian surface that was kind of expected to be drier. Scientists believe this area was actually a lake bed. It might be the bottom of a dried-up lake and all that sediment and other things that have accumulated there. All this can give us some important clues about the history of the lake. For instance, the types of organisms that might have lived there, how deep the lake was, how long it was there, and similar stuff. These wave-rippled patterns tell us that these rocks may have formed when strong Martian winds were moving the water in this big ancient lake. You know that specific sound you can hear when you're holding a seashell to your ear? You actually hear it because of the way the air gets trapped inside the shell and moves against its walls. The air cannot escape, so it vibrates at frequencies that depend on the size of the shell. In other words, you have a feeling you hear the sound of waves hitting a shore. That's Mars in my imagination now, a spot where you can still hear the long-lost sound of waves crashing against the shores of mysterious gigantic lakes. During its mission, Curiosity also came across a metallic object which turned out to be a meteorite. This unusual rock that came from space is made of nickel and iron. Its name is cacao, and it's about the size of a small car, 6.5 feet long, and weighs over a ton. This is an important discovery because we don't often find metallic objects on the Martian surface. Most of the rocks there are made of basalt or some other volcanic materials, so that chunk of metal could tell us more about the history of Mars and how it formed. Plus, it definitely stands out. The surface of Mars is red from oxides, while cacao is metallic-looking and dark gray. It's rounded and smooth, too, which means it once passed through Mars's atmosphere. There have been other robots exploring Mars, too. For instance, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MRO, stumbled upon circular sand dunes. Sand dunes are usually very common on the red planet. They come in many different shapes and sizes, but circular ones like these are really rare. They consist of dark sand with light-colored material surrounding them. And the cool thing is that these dunes are arranged in a specific pattern, similar to the spokes of a wheel. It could be because of the way the winds blow. But back to our buddy, Curiosity. It's been exploring many other interesting things, like oxygen levels in the Martian atmosphere. The levels change depending on the season. There's more oxygen in the spring and summer. It's still not clear why, though, and of course, even that is not enough for us to really breathe there. The concentration of oxygen on Mars is 0.1%, which is about 100 times less than the concentration in Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere of Mars is mostly made up of carbon dioxide, with traces of other gases. Curiosity was so good that it also decided to analyze the age of rocks it found. It seems they're much older than we previously thought. Some of them date back more than 3 billion years. Curiosity found organic molecules in soil samples too. These molecules are basically building blocks of life. Now, this doesn't prove there's indeed life on Mars. It's just one of the things that suggests there might have been some form of life a long time ago. Curiosity discovered potential evidence that there might be a large reservoir of liquid water beneath the south polar ice cap, probably very salty and full of different minerals. This high salinity is the reason why this water could remain liquid at temperatures well below freezing. It would be cool to have some sort of subsurface ocean to take a dip in, especially when these crazy Martian winds are raging on the surface. And it would be great to have something that would protect us from those insane radiation levels on the red planet. There are some pretty toxic chemicals and salts in the Martian soil, which can be really bad for humans. Astronauts could potentially end up being exposed to these toxic chemicals, either through direct contact with the soil or by inhaling dust that contains these salts. Also, these substances could be a problem for growing crops. This is a really big discovery for long-term missions to Mars, because astronauts would need to be able to grow their own food so they can survive while there. Another thing that favors the idea of potential life on Mars is discovering methane there. Methane is a very important finding because usually living organisms produce this gas. So, where did it come from if not from them? In reality, there are a few possible explanations for that. One is the geological activity of underground reservoirs. Another idea is that meteorites brought methane to the red planet. What's interesting is that levels of methane are higher in particular areas. So, yeah, I don't know about you, but I'll stick to the theory that it comes from living organisms. Now, it's possible that volcanoes on Mars are still active. We know there are many extinct volcanoes on the red planet, but we've never found enough evidence to prove that some of them are still alive. Scientists studied volcanic deposits and found out that some volcanoes could have erupted maybe 50,000 years ago. Before that, everyone thought the last eruption happened 3 to 4 billion years ago. If you could compress the geological history of Mars into just one day, this would be like having an eruption a second ago. So, you never know. There might still be magma bubbling in secret under the Martian surface. All the future generations that might end up building their life there could really have some fun. Mars turned into a cold and barren place that can't really support life over time. And one of the main reasons for that was losing its atmosphere. The red planet used to have a much thicker atmosphere, similar to Earth's. One major reason for that is its relatively weak magnetic field. Earth's magnetic field helps protect our atmosphere from the solar wind, a stream of charged particles that comes from the sun. Without this protection, Mars had nothing to help it confront this insanely strong force that eventually took away most of its atmosphere. Another factor that played a big role in the loss of Mars's atmosphere is its relatively low gravity. Because Mars has weaker gravity than Earth, it's easier for gas molecules to escape into space. So Mars probably used to be more similar to our home planet. But with its current thin atmosphere, it can't keep any heat, which makes it very cold and very complicated for us to explore. But maybe it's better for us that we didn't visit the red planet back in its old times. There's this story about an ancient megaflood that might have happened there. So yes, the red planet probably used to be a wetter and more hospitable place than it is today, with beautiful flowing rivers and amazing lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water. And some research showed evidence of large channels carved into the planet's surface. These channels are way bigger than any we previously found on the planet. They suggest this megaflood happened billions of years ago. Perhaps it happened as a result of different factors, like volcanic activity, melting ice, and the release of carbon dioxide from the planet's crust. The flood may have created some temporary pools of water too. Hopefully, it will mean more interesting clues for finding traces of microbial life. How about that?
Look at that! What is that perfectly shaped ice circle doing in the middle of the river? How did it even appear there? For such a circle to form, the conditions must be very peculiar. So let's see if you can make a similar ice formation at home. Ice circles are also called ice discs and ice pans. They form in rivers, lakes, and creeks when ice gathers in the center of the body of water moved by an eddy. The thing is, random eddies tend to follow circular routes. And in the winter, ice crystals often gather in such slow-moving waters. As a result, they form circular discs of ice. The current doesn't let these discs move away, it just slowly rotates them in one place. As an ice circle turns, it hits other chunks of ice or the shore and gets lathed down until it's perfectly round. There's another way for ice circles to form. When a body of water gets covered with ice, a current traveling underneath might break off a chunk of ice and start rotating it until it's shaped like a circle. These discs can be really large, up to 50 feet across. Another amazing ice phenomenon is called penitentes. These are snow formations found at very high altitudes. Numerous and closely spaced, they look like long, thin blades of hardened snow or ice that point towards the sun. These icy spires grow over snow-covered and glaciated regions in the dry Andes at a height of more than 13,000 feet. Some penitentes are just several inches tall, while others reach 16 feet. That's around 3 human heights. Such jagged structures form due to the process called sublimation. It's a bit similar to melting, but in this case, the sun turns the snow directly into vapor without melting it first. In other words, the ice skips the liquid stage and goes from its solid form to gas. Curved areas of the surface heat up and sublimate faster than others, forming dents. That's how penitentes get formed, and that's why they lean in the direction of the sun's rays. Now, this is called rabbit ice. And isn't it cute? This phenomenon has other names too. Ice flowers, ice wool, ice ribbon. Pick whatever you like. I'll stick to rabbit ice. It forms when the air has cooled down to freezing temperatures. But the ground hasn't frozen yet. Sap in the plant stems expands while freezing, and it causes cracks along the stem. What happens next is water gets drawn out through these cracks. It freezes once it comes in contact with the air. This process forms super thin layers of ice, creating something that resembles ribbons or petals of ice. The same phenomenon happens with woody plants, but in this case, the ice is even thinner, more hair-like. These ice formations are incredibly delicate, so if you want to see rabbit ice, look for it in the early morning in shaded areas. You can find frost flowers floating on the surface of a newly frozen lake or sea. In 2009, a team of scientists from the University of Washington was sailing near the North Pole. That's when they discovered a large field of these pretty ice formations. But the best thing was that when they melted a few of these blossoms, they noticed that the water contained an unusually large number of bacteria. But how do these amazing ice formations appear? The air must be extremely cold, colder than the surface of the ocean, and very dry. When the air is so different from the ocean, its dryness pulls some moisture out of the water. The air gets humid, but just for a while. The cold makes the water vapor heavy. No wonder the air wants to get rid of this additional weight. So, crystal by crystal, the air turns back into ice, creating delicate flowers, sometimes reaching up to 3 inches in height. The ocean literally blossoms. Needle ice also has many names, and the most creative of them are frost columns, ice fringes, and ice castles. This type of ice occurs in a similar way to rabbit ice, but the water gets drawn out from the soil surface through narrow capillaries. All this water freezes in needle-like columns. At first sight, these formations look like baled hay, but made out of snow. And actually, it's quite an accurate description. You know how hay gets rolled up into large balls? Well, the same way snow rollers form. The wind blows a chunk of snow along the ground. As it rolls, it picks up even more snow, growing in size. Snow rollers are usually cylindrical and hollow inside because the very first layer of snow often flakes away as the roller moves. These snow formations can get up to 2 feet in diameter. They occur when the temperatures are near melting and there is a fresh layer of fluffy snow on the ground. Oh, and it shouldn't stick to the surface it lies on. Don't forget about the wind either. It should be strong enough to make the roller, well, roll, but not too strong to break it apart. These conditions sound rather precise. That's why snow rollers are so rare. But it's not only ice that creates amazingly beautiful things. Fire can do it too. Look at Pele's hair. These thin threads may look golden and pretty, but they're very dangerous to pick up. The wind sometimes catches small droplets of lava coming from active volcanoes. These droplets get carried miles away from the vent and are stretched into super thin glass wires, also called hair lava. Some strands can be as long as 6 feet. Have you warmed up yet? Then it's time to cool down again. On March 19, 2018, the inhabitants of Alabama had to run for their lives not to be hit by huge chunks of ice falling from the sky. It was the infamous hailstorm of Alabama, which caused millions of dollars worth of damage. After the hailstorm, it looked as if the place had been thoroughly trashed by savages. Broken shop windows, smashed car windshields, broken billboards, and holes in roofs. But what made researchers really excited was a hailstone found near the town of Cullman, Alabama. This softball-sized monster was more than 5 inches across and thus set a new state record. Now, look at these pretty bubbles. They're pockets of highly flammable and combustible methane gas. Trapped underwater, this gas forms psychedelic landscapes and stunning patterns. Typical for northern latitude lakes, such as Lake Abraham in Alberta, Canada, these bubbles appear when animal remains, leaves, and plants fall into the water and get consumed by bacteria. These bacteria later excrete methane gas. But don't fall for the beauty of this phenomenon. When spring comes, the ice melts and the methane bubbles start to fizz and pop in a most amazing fashion. But if you happen to light a fire in the area, everything may go boom. Imagine surfing a perfect wave when it suddenly freezes. Well, it sure sounds creepy. Luckily, such things don't happen in life, right? Wrong. You can see mind-boggling frozen waves in Antarctica. These waves occur when the ice gets compressed and the ever-increasing pressure squeezes the air bubbles out of it. As for the beautiful blue color, it's the result of the ice melting and refreezing. And a bonus for you, frozen Niagara Falls. In 2018, the legendary waterfalls, located at the border between New York State and Ontario, Canada, managed to shock everyone into silence. Tourists who arrived to admire the power of the roaring water were astonished to find Niagara Falls frozen. Jumping ahead of myself, the waterfalls weren't frozen per se, since such a feat is impossible for a mass of flowing water that huge, but microscopic water droplets that got airborne off Niagara Falls, as well as the mist, formed a crust of ice over the rushing water. As a result, you could be looking at the waterfalls and be sure that they were frozen. In reality, the water kept flowing, but it was hidden beneath the ice.
You plan to spend your summer vacation in Africa. The final destination is the Sahara Desert. It's located in northern Africa, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. You're excited to ride camels and learn about the region's rich cultures. You hop on an extensively long flight, and finally, you are here. You find yourself in the world's biggest hot desert. Can you believe it's 3 million square miles? You're ready for your first adventure after drinking liters of ice-cold water. The guide gives you a choice. You can spend 2 weeks visiting a collection of oases, or you can help them solve an ongoing local mystery. Deep into the desert, near this Algerian town, lies a mystery begging to be solved. A collection of huge, spotted circles in the sand. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles in a straight line. The circles were first identified via Google Earth images several years ago. People have debated them for years, but no one seems to know the answer. The strange thing is that they are so many miles away from any towns, roads, or human activity. The quickest way to discover the truth behind the circles is asking questions. You grab your notebook and set out to talk to locals. Everyone is helpful in this scenario: geographers, anthropologists, elders, and historians. The first person you talk to is a map expert. You need to understand if those circles were authentic or a satellite glitch. You end up interviewing the people who take Google Earth satellite pictures. The circles are really there. They appear in multiple pictures from many years. Then, let's understand why they are there in the first place. After 2 days of interviews, you have your first lead. The circles could be the result of oil activity. Experts explained why this would make sense. Algeria is a rich area for natural resources, so this would be a sensible guess. Usually, to find out if there is anything worth extracting, companies would undertake seismic surveys. Seismic surveys are a way of analyzing the Earth's surface by sending shock waves into the ground. Depending on how these waves bounce back, you'll know what is located there. A special vehicle could have marked the soil that way. So, did we unravel the mystery? Not quite so. As you know, the Sahara Desert is one of the driest areas on the planet. The average high temperatures in summer are over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive there, people need to find ways of accessing water. So, these circles could be a kind of ruin or leftovers from ancient water wells. Again, I'd say this is a sensible guess. Ready for some fact-checking? Some anthropologists agree that these circles could be ancient fogueras. Foguera is the name of a 2,500-year-old style of irrigation system, usually found in northern Africa. It is also known as a qanat in other places in northern Africa. Locals would dig a deep well at an elevated point, deep enough to tap into underground water. They would then dig parallel shafts at regular distances. Then they would dig an underground channel that connected the city to the well. Solely with the help of gravity, water would run from the well to the city. This traditional technology provided water for crops, livestock, and humans. Now, let's say these wells made human-made oases possible. Even the closest municipality name was an indication that this could be true. The name Fogueret Essaouira is actually named after Fogueras, these ancient wells. Now, this lead was proving to be very accurate. You decide to travel over there to see for yourself. You take a local bus, sit back, and enjoy the ride. The landscape in northern Algeria is filled with ancient-looking towns. You even see ruins of wells along the way, on the outskirts of smaller cities. Opening Google satellite images, you can see the qanat's markings on the ground, a series of holes running down several miles. But as soon as you arrive, you find out you were wrong. Dale Lightfoot, one of the world's leading experts on canots, said that the circles were definitely not canots. Even the satellite images confirm this difference. Uh-oh, we were so close. Apparently, canots or phaguras would not run down a straight line. They wouldn't be shaped like circles. Another clue that this wasn't the case was that there were no towns at the end. The circles were really far away from any human activity, and canots were explicitly built to provide water for human settlements. Well, it sure was a good try. You almost gave up on this mystery when you decided to take one more field trip. It was days of preparation, pick up cars, food, equipment, all so that the mystery of the Sahara circles could be unraveled. On the first day, you drove over 99 miles into the desert. You were always curious to see what this part of the world looked like. Over there, you see nothing but mustard yellow dunes. The night sky is pretty decent though. You can see the entire Milky Way with your own eyes. You set up camp and sleep under a canopy of stars. The next day, tension grows. There's no cell reception. Oh dear. But thankfully, you added the coordinates of the circles to your Google map. And surprise, the offline mode works out there. You follow the coordinates, but it leads you astray. You start to get nervous, thinking this was all in vain. But you and the team get into the car and drive a few more miles past the coordinates on your phone. After a very bumpy ride, you can't believe your eyes. There it is, an enormous crater dug on the sand, surrounded by 12 smaller holes. From up high, it looks like a clock, without the pointers, of course. On the ground, they're very faint, so faint you almost miss them. Searching the area, you notice all the holes had something similar, metal wires, thin wires that you can pull from the ground. They're buried deep, so you start digging. An object starts to reveal itself. Uh-oh, it looks like old dynamite. This certainly surprises you. Better stop digging to avoid any accidents. At the end of the survey, you feel satisfied, but still curious. What could all this dynamite mean? And who put it there? What comes next is the turning point of your adventure. Walking back to the car, you see something shining on the ground. You approach the item with curiosity. It's round and rusty and looks like a sardine can? What's that doing here? Could this give you more clues about the circle's mystery? Just in case, you pick it up and put it in the car. Back in the city, the puzzle pieces start to reveal the story behind the Sahara circles. You bring photos and the sardine can and show them to local experts. They analyze your material and give you an intriguing verdict. As it turns out, guess number 1 was the closest one to the truth. So, what happened to the first guess? Why do we need to keep digging deeper? Well, because it was only half right. The Sahara circles are not a historical footprint of seismic surveying. Back when the circles were made, this technology didn't even exist. But they sure are related to oil exploration. The dynamite-filled holes were an old method for oil searching. The circles are the leftovers of surveyors looking for resources underground. And the sardine cans? Well, they were left by the workers who held explosion works. You gotta eat, right? According to the model of the can, this happened more or less around the 1950s and 1960s. So these circles aren't even that ancient. More like modern ones, if you ask me. Well. Hope you are glad you tagged along and helped unravel this mystery. See you in the next mystery-solving adventure. The snow-capped shape of Mount Taranaki, in the middle of Egmont National Park in New Zealand, is surrounded by a dense, dark-colored forest. It creates a gloomy green circle around the area. From above, the circle looks almost perfect. But it's only because of the local farmers. They use all the fertile soil they can, and it results in a contrasting color scheme. A near-perfect cone volcano, a rare geological phenomenon, has occasionally been erupting for over 100,000 years. It grew taller and larger after every eruption. It's predicted that in about 50 years, this volcano could turn the area around it into another Pompeii. In Italy, there's a unique spot known as the Giant Pink Bunny. You can find this humongous art project on the green fields of the Coleto Fava Mountain in northern Italy. The 200-foot-long and 20-foot-high bunny appeared in 2005. It was created by the art group Gelatin from Vienna. Not only does it have a strange and unique design, but it's also knitted. It took the team 5 years to finish the delicate structure. It used to be just like any other stuffed toy. Visitors could climb the bunny, taking in the views around them. But since it was placed on the hills, the art piece has started decaying. After all, it was only meant to last 20 years at the most. The once bright pink bunny has turned gray and has almost disappeared. If you look at the Google Maps satellite images these days, you might only notice its outline. While not as popular as Old Faithful, the Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone Park, Wyoming is one of the most spectacular sights to see even from ground level. But from above, the bright bands of orange, yellow, and green really start showing their beauty. It's one of the biggest springs in the world, larger than a football field at 370 feet across. The hot water in it travels 121 feet to the surface. The spring is a feeding ground for heat-loving bacteria that change their color in the cooler water. A director searching for an unusual area for filming discovered a mysterious floating island in northeastern Argentina. Almost perfectly round and surrounded by a dark forest, it gives you an eerie feeling. No wonder the place got nicknamed the Eye. With the help of time lapses on Google Earth, it was discovered that the inner landmass was moving around rather than sitting still as was first believed. A circle of land 387 feet in diameter, ranging from several inches to many feet in thickness, casually floats in the clear waters. It even rotates slowly, pushed by the cold water from below. This water is still being studied. It's completely exclusive to the surrounding area. From above, it looks like nothing more than a little island sitting in Homebush Bay, Australia. But zooming in will change that perspective. Once a successful trading port, the bay is filled with 4 abandoned cargo freighters that were too hard to remove. Once they became decommissioned, they were left in the bay and forgotten. The shipwrecked SS Airfield transformed from a broken-down wreck into a small but beautiful nature reserve. It's filled with thriving mango trees that have overtaken the ship and are slowly breaking down its hull. In the Gobi Desert, in the northeast part of China, bizarre symbols appeared in certain areas. This led to many theories of what they could be. Maybe ancient markings like the Nazca lines found in Peru. Guesses range from odd weather patterns and pipelines for some future development to target practice areas, but it turned out to be none of those. They're simply special symbols used to calibrate the cameras on China's satellites. The Badlands Guardian in Walsh, Canada, is one of the most famous and fascinating spots you can find on Google Earth. It looks like a man's head carved into the landscape. A feather headpiece that Native Americans used to wear sits on top of the head. It must be quite a modern design because the face also seems to have a pair of earphones. Unfortunately, it's just a simple road with an oil rig at the end. From ground level, the entire thing is not nearly as impressive. It looks just like any other exposed rock face that's been changed by the seasons. But this phenomenon is nothing more than the pareidolia effect, the same that makes you see objects in the clouds. An island on a lake, on an island in a lake, on an island is surely a mouthful. But Google Earth beautifully captured the place. A tiny island named Vulcan Point sits inside a crater lake on an island called Volcano Island inside a lake called Lake Toll on the Philippine islands of Luzon. It's one of the only 2 lakes in the world that have been discovered to have a third-order island in them. Toll Volcano is still active, and because of the large lake inside the crater, there's a risk of a volcanic tsunami. It can be triggered by debris falling into the lake after an eruption. This might create waves in the lake that can spill over the sides of the crater. The Firefox crop circle appeared in a cornfield in Oregon in 2006, but it wasn't some mystery or rare phenomenon. Celebrating the browser's 50 millionth download, The Linux users group from the Oregon State University created the giant logo. It was larger than 45,000 square feet. The group members stomped down all the stocks in a near-perfect circle. It was completed in under 24 hours after 2 careful weeks of planning. The final circle had a diameter of over 200 feet and was completely invisible from the road. It could only be appreciated from the sky. The most beautiful bright blue ponds are found at the Intrepid Potash Mine near Moab, Utah. Most potash forms in desert regions where inland seas or lakes dry out. As the water evaporates, it leaves behind potassium salt deposits. Most evaporation ponds are more reddish in color, but some dye was added to these particular ones. Dark water absorbs more sunlight and heat, speeding up the evaporation process. This leaves behind the salts much more quickly. Stunning aerial views of these ponds are a bonus. Making the largest advertising logo on Earth is something every marketing agency would dream of doing. And Coca-Cola did just that in 1986. The logo is an extremely large sculpture. It can only be viewed in its entirety from the sky. The biggest problem about such advertising, though, is that barely anyone knows about it. This huge Coke ad is 160 feet tall and 394 feet wide. It was built from 70,000 empty Coke bottles in northern Chile's Arica. The gigantic monument was created to celebrate the brand's 100-year anniversary. A guitar of this size can only be appreciated from extremely high above. The unusual shaped forest is located south of Cordoba in the Pampa region of Argentina. Known as the Guitar Forest, it extends for more than half a mile. It also contains more than 7,000 cypress and eucalyptus trees. A 74-year-old Argentine farmer, with the help of his children, managed to transform this piece of land into something magical, all done to pay tribute to his beloved wife. From high above, this area seems to be just a collection of boulders in the middle of a lake, but this is actually Hippo Pool in Tanzania. Hippos are common in all the rivers in the area, but this spot is certainly the best in the Serengeti to watch them playing around. The animals there swim in large groups of about 200 hippos. They stir up the waters and fill every square inch of space inside. If you can't get to Tanzania to see the spectacle, Google Earth gives you the opportunity to have this experience in the safety of your home. There are many large-sized pools in the world, and then there's the pool at San Alfonso del Mar, a resort outside of Santiago, Chile. Officially, the world's largest pool ever created. It cost nearly $2 billion to build. The pool is roughly the size of about 16 football fields. The water for the pool is taken from the Pacific Ocean. It gets filtered and treated multiple times a day to keep the gigantic pool clean. There's a saltwater pool inside a large glass pyramid if you want to swim in a pool inside a pool. I'm getting confused. A strange and mysterious swirling pattern appeared in the desert of Egypt back in 1997. When this design was first discovered on Google Earth, it created a bit of a stir of what it could be. That was until it turned out to be nothing more than a giant art installation called Desert Breath. 2 intertwining spirals are complete opposites. One spiral is piles of sand that are shaped like cones, and the other is made of mini craters. When the installation was first completed, the spirals led to the center of a circular pool of water. But since then, the water has dried out. Imagine you decided to take a road trip the old-fashioned way. And by that I mean you decide to do it without the help of any technology. What? So you go to the nearest convenience store and buy a map of each state you plan to pass through. You buckle them up on the passenger seat right next to you and set off on your adventure. During your first week, you arrive in the state of New York. You wave bye-bye to Lady Liberty, eat a slice of pizza, and head upstate. Near the Catskills, you notice you're running low on gas and decide to stop in the nearest town to fill up your tank. You check your map, and it appears that the nearest place is a small village called Aglo, right at the next intersection. You drive a few minutes and pass through a sign that says, "Welcome to Aglo, home of the Aglo General Store." Well, this must be it, you think to yourself. But the town is strangely empty. You can't find the store or the gas station you were looking for. There are no houses. You start to think there might be a mistake. Agloe doesn't seem to exist. This story may sound made up, but it could have actually happened to anyone passing through New York a few years ago. Actually, the so-called town of Agloe is what is called a phantom settlement or a paper town. There are several of these around the world, but Agloe is probably the most famous. Paper towns are basically fake towns. That is, they don't really exist. They're made up of Easter eggs put there by map makers as a kind of copyright trap. Maps are tough to make. To create a map from scratch, one has to do years of fieldwork or analysis of satellite photos. That's why plagiarism has always been rampant among map makers. It's pretty easy to redraw the same geographical features from one map onto a new map, and it is hard to get caught. People are, after all, drawing the exact same world. That's why map makers came up with a way to catch individuals stealing their data. Some map makers may include a mountain that is bigger than they are in reality. Others might add a slight turn on a road, where in reality there is none. For example, in the early 1970s, a fake mountain peak appeared on some Boulder County maps. The addition of this previously unknown peak, called Mount Richard, into local maps began to confuse Colorado rock climbers at the time. It turned out that Mount Richard was one of these copyright traps, put there by a local mapsman called Richard Ciacci. Let's just say he must have decided to pay a tribute to himself with this little addition. Now, adding a paper town is perhaps one of the most extreme solutions, one that mapmakers hope goes unnoticed. But that's not what usually happens, which leads us back to the Agloe story. Mapmakers Ernest Alpertz and Otto Lindbergh from the CDG, General Drafting Corporation, were part of the largest map publishers of the 1930s. Back then, the company was commissioned to create a map of the state of New York. That's when the two men had an idea. In order to prevent copyright infringement, they would create a phantom settlement combining parts of their names together. They came up with the strange name Agloe and added the fake town along Route 206 near the water reservoir of Catskills in upstate New York. The area was supposed to be, in reality, a dirt road. Years later, Rand McNally, another map designing company, produced a map of New York that included a town called Agloe in the same location where CDG had originally placed it. Lindbergh was convinced that he had a copyright case against his competitor, but the story just kept getting more complicated. Both companies went to settle the case in court, but as it turned out, McNally had a legitimate reason for adding Agloe to their version of a New York map. You see, in order to fabricate their maps, McNally did a thorough research on real estate and establishments located in each existing town. And as it turned out, Agloe was not an empty town when they drew their map. Records show that the town housed an establishment named Agloe General Store. Sure, it was the only building in town, but that was enough for the mapmakers to believe that such a town really existed. They added Agloe to the map like they would add any other town with physical establishments. It seemed they weren't infringing any copyright if this once phantom settlement had somehow come to life. The plot twist is that CDG's Alpers and Lindbergh could never have foreseen that someone would decide to occupy a made-up town. But it happened. One day, someone bought a map from a regional gas station that had Agloe marked on it. The person wanted to open a store more or less where Agloe existed, so they decided to name the store after the town it was in. They trusted the accuracy of the map they bought and named their business Agloe General Store. After all, why would there be a non-existent town on an official map? The general store didn't last many years, only enough to turn this story into a mess. On the bright side, this whole debacle turned Agloe into a super famous fictitious settlement. It became a tourist spot, with people driving from all over the U.S. to get a picture of the town's welcome sign. Now, as we said before, paper towns are plenty around the world and over time, too. A 2005 BBC documentary revealed that the City of London alone had over 100 tiny fake streets or paper streets around the city. For instance, the so-called Moat Lane, is supposedly a curving road in Finchley, North London. But if you ever decide to go visit, you'll find nothing but trees and gardens. And what about Argleton, a town in the north of England? Or, more accurately, an empty field in northeastern England. Argleton existed for a while on Google Maps. There were hotel listings and apartments for rent in town. Well, the only thing is that they weren't really in Argleton, but rather in nearby settlements. It's believed that Google Maps imported these fake streets into its database, as they used renowned copyrighted atlases as their sources. But as the truth about these paper streets surfaced, the company later deleted them. If we turn back the clock a few hundred years, we'll find another mystery story involving a possible phantom settlement. But this isn't a tiny town at an intersection, but rather an entire island. Bermejo Island was speculated to be a tiny inhabited island. It appeared on many maps of the 16th and 17th centuries and was a hot spot for Spanish explorers. Its location sometimes varied slightly from map to map, and occasionally its name appeared as Vermija, but its existence seems certain enough. It wasn't until the 18th century that the island stopped being depicted in maps altogether. This island's last appearance dates back to a 1921 edition of a Mexican atlas, and then, poof, it dropped out of the horizon altogether. The case of Mexico's disappeared island has raised many questions. Did it sink? Was it destroyed? Are people simply looking for it in the wrong place? 3 official investigations took place in 2009 to locate the island. They used high-end technologies, scouring Mexico's oceans and seabeds. Yet, Bermeja remained nowhere to be found. One can't help but wonder if the island ever existed at all. Similar to modern-day mapmakers, 16th and 17th century mapmakers had their way to trick map users. Instead of copyright traps, these fake towns or even fake islands served as a way to fool and confuse enemies and unwanted voyagers. Since a long time has gone by, it's hard to know whether Bermeja was just another phantom settlement. It stopped being depicted on maps, but this mysterious case still leaves people baffled and confused.
It was April 10, 1912. Richard had just departed from Southampton, England, aboard the most famous ship of the time, dubbed the Unsinkable. Since he had just witnessed a near collision with the SS City of New York, he decided to write to his wife and report the unfortunate and frightening event. "My dearest Sal," he wrote, "we got away yesterday after a lot of trouble." Little did he know that a mere 4 days later, both his pen and the ship he was on would be lost forever at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Was this some sort of bad omen? Did Richard actually foresee what was about to happen to the ship he was on? In case you haven't figured it out by now, Mr. Richard Geddes was aboard the Titanic on the day that he wrote the letter to his wife. On April 14, 1912, the ship seemed to have been lost forever. Along with it, so many secrets and treasures have settled at the bottom of the ocean. It took until 1985 for the Titanic's wreck to be finally rediscovered using state-of-the-art sonar technology. Ever since then, they've managed to recover thousands of items from the Titanic, and many of them went on display or auction. Things like jewelry, a life jacket, a menu from the ship's restaurant, or even a sample square of carpet from the first-class stateroom have all captivated the public's attention, just like the many stories of the people on board. Scientists have even tried to come up with strategies to get the Titanic back up altogether to properly study it and stop it from getting more and more damaged at the bottom of the ocean. Some have suggested filling the wreck with ping pong balls to make it float, while others even considered injecting it with 180,000 tons of Vaseline. Another idea was to use 450,000 tons of liquid nitrogen to trap it in an iceberg that would float to the surface. But they eventually had to let go of all these potential strategies since the Titanic is way too fragile to ever be recovered. The Titanic may be one of the most interesting ships lying at the bottom of the ocean, at least in popular culture, but deep-sea divers have a lot of other stories to share. Planes also sometimes find their way to the bottom of the ocean. Deep-sea divers in Oahu, Hawaii came across the wreckage of an F-4U Corsair plane. It seems to have crashed into the ocean in 1946, as it didn't have sufficient fuel. If you can dive deep enough, you might even stumble upon statues and lost artifacts, like those found in the world's only underwater archaeological park off the coast of Naples, Italy. It features the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Baia. The underwater statues found here are breathtaking, to say the least. In an ironic twist of events, some of the equipment we intended to use to get us to the moon was lost at the bottom of the sea for a very long time. But how did that happen? Beginning from the late 1960s and ending in the early 70s, many Apollo rockets were launched to orbit the Earth and the Moon. When reaching altitudes of about 38 miles, the first portion of the spacecraft, including the engines, needed to separate. People thought these components got destroyed or lost forever. But were they really? In 2012, a team of specialists discovered a bunch of rocket engines 14,000 feet off the coast of Florida. They have since gone through a 2-year renovation plan and are now on display at Seattle's Museum of Flight. Can you imagine stumbling upon a whole city underwater? Back in 2001, a lost city was discovered in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of India. Some archaeologists believe it to be the oldest city in history. By comparison, it's almost the size of Manhattan and features massive walls and even plazas. They stumbled upon pieces of sculpture, artwork, and even what looked like ancient wooden furniture, believed to date back up to 9,500 years ago and 5,000 years older than any city previously discovered. Okay, how about an underwater river? I can't even imagine what that would look like, but some deep divers claim to have seen it south of Tulum, Mexico. Is that even possible? Well, not really, since the Cenote Angelita Cave is not a true river, but a very special type of optical illusion. It's formed by a halocline, meaning a cloud of hydrogen sulfide at the bottom of this underwater cave. Turns out you can actually swim right through this cloud, which makes you feel like you're swimming through a flowing body of water. Not all things discovered underwater are inanimate objects. Some of them are actually quite scary sea creatures. A jellyfish might not be on your list of things to look out for if you can avoid the stings. But this giant one, also known as a lion's mane jellyfish, is the largest known species of its kind. In all fairness, you'll only uncover it if you happen to dive into the waters of the Arctic, Northern Atlantic, and Northern Pacific Oceans. You surely won't miss it, since it stretches across 120 feet from the top to the bottom of its tentacles. When it comes to deep-sea diving, a lot of people are looking to discover some lost treasure. One diver was lucky enough to have hit the literal jackpot when he came upon nearly $1 million worth of treasure on the bottom of the seabed. That was back in 2015, when this lucky diver was swimming just off the coast of Florida. What did he find, you might ask? Well, about 51 gold coins, 40 feet of gold chain, and a rare single coin that was tailored for the King of Spain, Philip V. Speaking of people looking for lost treasures, divers also sometimes found pirate ships. They discovered one of these pirate shipwrecks in 2015 off the coast of Colombia. It dates back to the 18th century. The value of this forgotten ship was estimated to be between $4 billion and $17 billion, as it contained treasures, precious stones, gold, and countless other really valuable items. By comparison, a whole island in the Bahamas is up for grabs at $75 million. A computer is the last thing you'd ever expect to discover underwater, right? And this was no regular computer, but an ancient one. And yet, someone stumbled upon it between 1900 and 1901 on the spot of a shipwreck located off one Greek island. Researchers believe this weird stone contraption to be the earliest form of a computer. It was designed to serve many purposes, such as predicting astronomical positions and eclipses on the calendar. Since humanity lost most of the technology used back then, it was wonderful to rediscover it so many years later. It let us piece together many of the ancient Greeks' accomplishments. The computer is now at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, should you ever want to check it out in person. This has to be one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's called the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest part of the Earth's oceans. We really don't know how deep it is, since it's so difficult to measure, but it's somewhere around 7 miles deep, and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. They first studied this massive underwater hole back in 1875 using a weighted rope. Back in 2012, a Canadian film director named James Cameron reached the bottom of the trench in the submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger. Some of the most bizarre creatures on the planet call this place their home, including the Dumbo octopus, the sea cucumber, and the goblin shark. The Mariana Trench took its name after the nearby Mariana Islands, which are named Las Marianas in honor of the Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria.
Have you ever wondered how cool buildings of the future are going to look? Well, hold on tight because artificial intelligence is here to revolutionize the world of architecture. AI is a great sidekick. It can give the architects incredible new tools to create mind-blowing structures that are not only stunning, but also eco-friendly and super efficient. So let's check what our beautiful future might look like. First of all, you know how cities can get crazy busy and overwhelming, right? Well, guess what? AI is here to save the day and make our cities super smart. Imagine you're cruising down the road in your flying car. Yes, we'll have those. Thanks to AI, the traffic flows like a dream. No more endless gridlock. The city knows where the most likely crime spots are and takes proactive steps to keep us safe. It's like having superheroes on every corner. And hey, forget about trash piling up. AI makes sure waste is managed efficiently, keeping our city clean and fresh. They can act as a city manager who can optimize everything from traffic to safety and even waste disposal. They can analyze tons of data from all sorts of places like sensors and social media. With all that information, they can help city planners make brilliant decisions that make our lives better. Okay, so you stroll down the street, and your eyes are instantly captivated by an extraordinary building. Its futuristic curves and features make it stand out from the rest. And it not only catches your eye, but also gives Mother Nature a high five. You might think it was designed by a genius architect, but little do you know it was actually a collaboration between humans and artificial intelligence. Imagine having a super smart design buddy who can whip up thousands of incredible building ideas in a blink of an eye. That's what AI-assisted design software does for architects. It can generate and assess a ton of design options. They take into account stuff like the best materials to use and the perfect placement for the building. Also, by analyzing data and crunching numbers, algorithms can help optimize the building's design. They can ensure it minimizes energy usage, conserves water, and manages waste like a pro. Every building strives to reduce costs, save energy, and promote a better world. The result? Architectural masterpieces that are both jaw-droppingly beautiful and super practical. The cityscape of the future will be dotted with these awe-inspiring structures. Oh, but that wasn't impressive enough for you? Well, how about a stunning, futuristic building that seems to defy gravity? It's not made of traditional bricks and mortar, oh no. This marvel was created using the powers of 3D printing. With the help of AI, architects designed every intricate detail and fed all the important data, like what materials to use and how the site conditions might affect the structure. AI algorithms worked their magic to optimize the design, making it both breathtakingly beautiful and rock solid. 3D printing is basically like having a magical machine that can create awesome structures straight out of a sci-fi movie, and AI jumps in to make sure these structures are not just pretty, but also strong. In the city of the future, 3D printing will become the ultimate architect's tool. It will allow them to create structures that were once impossible to build. From mind-bending shapes to intricate details, the possibilities are endless. But AI isn't just making buildings look great, it also makes them efficient and cozy. Let's say you step into a futuristic office building, and voila! The lights automatically adjust to match your mood, and the temperature is set perfectly for you. These futuristic buildings are capable of sensing and responding to their surroundings, just like you do. They control the lighting, keeping it just right for the time of day. They manage the temperature, so it's always cozy and comfortable. They even keep a watchful eye on security and fix small issues before they become big headaches. So, the smart building knows when people come and go, so it optimizes energy usage accordingly, saving the planet and some cash along the way. Now the cool thing is, all these aren't the only possibilities. How about turning skyscrapers into a vertical forest? Recently, an architect from India got super excited about the power of artificial intelligence. So, he decided to team up with an image bot called Midjourney to create a vision for the future. But instead of a dull, robotic world, they aimed for something spectacular. With text prompts like utopian technology and futuristic towers, the architect and AI got to work. Guess what? Midjourney didn't disappoint. It conjured up a world where buildings were covered in lush vertical forests and adorned with shapes inspired by nature. They wanted to create a sustainable future that harmonized with the environment. The architect, Manas Bhatia, is super positive about AI's potential. He doesn't see it as a threat to his job, but as a powerful tool for positive change. He envisions a future where architects and AI collaborate to make breathtaking designs. In his project, Bhatia even asked the AI to imagine symbiotic and hollowed structures, and it responded with pictures of apartments nestled within hollowed-out trees. Imagine a world where the building itself becomes a living, breathing part of nature. Well, Bhatia believes that nature should play a big role in architecture. He loves designing structures that embrace nature's beauty and functionality. From buildings built around trees to facades that regulate temperature, he's all about blending architecture with the natural world. With architects like Bhatia and the superpowers of AI, the future of cities is going to be amazing. So get ready to step into a world where nature and technology coexist in perfect harmony. It's a dream we can't wait to see come true. Or, if you're not a big fan of trees, how about this? Skyscrapers that aren't made of solid bricks, but instead, they're inflatable wonders. Zumo, an architectural practice in Barcelona, used the magic of AI to bring these wobbly structures to life. These inflatable superstructures rise above future cities like illuminated balloons in the sky. Here's the best part. These inflatable buildings have sustainability superpowers. You can pump them up to towering heights, flatten them for easy transportation, and rebuild them wherever they're needed. Plus, they're powered by renewable energy, reducing their impact on the environment. Pretty cool, right? Phew, the future is zooming toward us like a rocket. Artificial intelligence can become the secret sauce that makes architects' work extra special. But hey, with great power comes great responsibility. We need to use AI wisely and ethically. For now, we don't have to worry about machines replacing architects. Artificial intelligence still needs a human hand, or else we might end up with buildings that look like mashed up bananas or ice cream cones, unless that's your thing. In addition, humans have one important advantage. They, well, are humans. We need to keep in mind that artificial intelligence doesn't have emotional intelligence. It's a brainy genius, but it can't fully understand the feelings and vibes we humans crave in our spaces. So, we must remember to infuse our designs with that human touch, those warm and fuzzy elements that make us go, "Ah, I feel right at home." And let's not forget that AI is still learning. It's basically just taking its first steps, and we need to be patient and give it time to grow. Rushing things too quickly could lead to wonky designs or buildings that look like a jumbled puzzle. This might look cool if you like avant-garde architecture, but for regular folk, no thanks. So, as the future unfolds at warp speed, let's embrace the wonders of AI in architecture. But let's also remember to balance its brilliance with our own human touch. Together, we can create a future where buildings are not just functional, but also filled with heart and soul. It's an adventure that's out of this